He walked out on the night she was ready to tell him everything. Nico Valenti had built an empire on instinct, and in one night, his instincts destroyed him. His wife stood in the marble foyer of their Las Vegas penthouse, rain hammering the glass walls, holding a secret so large it could end wars or start them. She had the name, the bloodline, the child growing inside her. She had 3 years of patience and one final chance to save them both. But Nico Valenti chose another woman. And in doing so, he didn't just lose a wife, he lost a kingdom he never knew was his. If this story already has your heart, drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happens next will shake you to the core. Set. The rain came without warning, the way the worst things always do. One moment the Las Vegas skyline was blazing, a cathedral of neon and greed pressed against a desert sky. And the next, the storm cracked open above the strip, and rain slammed down in sheets so thick it felt like the city was being punished for something it hadn't done yet. The streets below the Valenti penthouse flooded fast. Gutters choked. Valets sprinted under awnings with their jackets over their heads, shoes already soaked through. 300 feet above all of it, behind floor-to-ceiling glass that ran the full length of the 52nd floor, Mara Voss stood perfectly still and watched the water run down the windows in long, crooked rivers. She had been standing there for 11 minutes. She knew because she had counted. Counting was something she did when the anxiety climbed too high, when the walls of whatever room she was in started to feel like they were closing in, and she needed something real to hold on to. Numbers were real. Numbers did not lie or shift or change their minds. Numbers did not look at you with that particular coldness Nico had perfected over the last 4 months. The look that said, "I am tolerating you," without his mouth ever having to form the words. 11 minutes since she had heard his voice from the bedroom. Not his voice speaking to her, his voice speaking to someone else. Low. Careful. Threaded through with something warm that he hadn't used with her since their 2nd year of marriage. Maybe longer. She hadn't meant to hear it. She had come upstairs early from the private dinner they were supposed to be attending together. A dinner she had dressed for, sat through the first course of, then excused herself from, when the nausea hit again. The 3rd time this week. She had taken the private elevator up while Nico stayed at the table to close some deals she wasn't supposed to ask about. That was the unspoken contract of their marriage. She did not ask, and he did not lie. Most of the time it worked. Tonight it didn't. She had stepped off the elevator and heard him before she even reached the bedroom doorway. Standing in the hallway outside the suite, tie loosened, one hand pressed flat against the window glass like he was trying to feel the storm through it. His back was to her. He didn't hear her come in. "I know," he said into the phone. "I know. I'll handle it." A pause, then, quieter. "I want to see you tonight." And that was all. But it was enough. Mara had backed away from the doorway before he could turn around. She had walked to the far end of the living room, past the white sectional they had argued over buying, past the bar cart she almost never touched, past the glass coffee table where she had once left a positive pregnancy test face up because she couldn't figure out how else to begin that particular conversation. She had stood at the window and started counting. 11 minutes. She heard him come into the room at 12. He didn't announce himself. He didn't call her name. He crossed the marble floor with the practiced ease of a man who moved through spaces like he owned them, which, technically, he did. The penthouse was in his name. The building was in his name. Most of the city, in one way or another, was in his name. Nico Valenti had spent 15 years turning a mid-level import operation into something so layered and legitimate-looking that half the politicians in Nevada had his cell number and used it. He was 41 years old. He had a serpent tattoo that started behind his left ear, wound down his neck, and disappeared beneath his collar, a relic from the years before the suits and the lawyers and the offshore accounts. He had charcoal eyes and a jaw that looked like it had been carved out of something expensive, and he had a way of entering a room that made other men straighten their spines without realizing they were doing it. He stopped when he saw her at the window. "You're back early," he said. "The food wasn't agreeing with me." He was quiet for a moment. She could feel him measuring the air between them, the way he always did, reading it for threat levels, for shifts in temperature, for anything that might require a countermove. Nico Valenti had not survived this long by missing things. "You should lie down," he said. "I'm fine." Mara. I said I'm fine, Nico. She turned around then. She had learned, over 3 years, that there were conversations you could not have with your back to a man like him. He needed to see your face. He interpreted everything else as evasion, and with Nico, evasion was the same as guilt. He was standing in the center of the room with his jacket still on, tie still loose, phone nowhere visible. He looked like a man who had already made a decision and was now managing the aftermath of it. Who were you talking to? She asked. Business. At this hour. Business doesn't stop because it rains. She studied him. He let her. That was the thing about Nico. He could meet your eyes through anything. He had that quality that liars sometimes develop after years of practice. Perfect stillness. No flinching. No tells. He had looked her straight in the eye through 3 years of half-truths, and she had loved him anyway, which was a fact she was still reconciling with her own intelligence. I need to talk to you, she said. Can it wait until… No. The word came out flatter than she intended. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, exactly. More like impatience being forced into a shape that resembled concern. All right, he said. He moved to the bar cart, lifted the stopper from the crystal decanter, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. He didn't ask if she wanted any. He knew she wasn't drinking. He had noticed that much. Mara pressed her fingertips against the cold glass of the window, then pushed off from it and walked toward him. 3 years of careful silence pressing against the inside of her chest. 3 years of swallowed names and edited histories and careful, deliberate omissions. She had done it because she loved him. She had done it because she was afraid of what the truth would do to what they had. She had done it because some part of her, the stubborn part that had survived a childhood spent in the shadow of Alaric Voss's world, had believed she could build something that belonged entirely to herself, separate from the dynasty, separate from the blood. She had been wrong. There are things about me, she started, that I haven't told you. He took a sip of his whiskey, watching her. Big things, she said. Things that affect you. Things that affect what's happening right now between our families, between your organization and… Mara. Let me finish. Mara. His voice was softer now, which was somehow worse, the softness he used when he was closing a door. I know this is about Celine. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. She stared at him. You've been distant for weeks, he said, setting his glass down with the precise care of a man who does not want his hands to shake. I know you felt something was off. And you're right, something is off. He exhaled. Not a sigh. Something more controlled, a release of pressure. I've been trying to find the right time to… Don't, she said. I'm not trying to hurt you. Don't. She's… He stopped, pressed his mouth together, started again. What I have with her is… It's different from what I'm not saying what we had wasn't… Stop talking. He stopped. The rain hit the glass so hard it sounded like static, like the building was losing signal. Mara stood 4 feet away from her husband and felt the floor shift beneath her. Not literally, but in the way it does when the version of the world you have been living in dissolves, and you realize the whole structure was thinner than you thought. She had known. Of course she had known. You don't love someone for 3 years without learning how they breathe when something's wrong, how their silences change shape, how the quality of their attention shifts when it moves toward someone else. She had known for months. She had been building toward this conversation for weeks, trying to time it right, trying to find the moment when she could lay everything on the table at once. Her name, her father, the child, all of it. She had run out of time. You're leaving me, she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer immediately, which was its own answer. I think it's better… How long? Mara… How long, Nico? He looked at the window, then back at her. 7 months. 7 months. She had been carrying his child for 9 weeks. She had found out 6 weeks ago. The math was not kind. I was going to tell you, he said. I was waiting for the right… You were never going to tell me… She heard her own voice and didn't recognize it. Not because it was breaking, but because it wasn't. It was completely level, controlled in a way she hadn't felt in years. You were going to keep this going until it became impossible to ignore, and then you were going to frame it as something you were doing for both of us. He said nothing. Because that's what you do, she said. You manage problems. That's all I am right now. A problem you need to manage. That's not... I don't think of you like, I need to tell you something. She cut through him without raising her voice. And I need you to listen to me. Not manage me. Not calculate the response. Actually listen. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. She opened her mouth. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, not at her, at the phone. Just a reflex. Just a second. But it was enough for her to see the name on the screen before he turned it face down against his palm. One name, 3 syllables. Celine. Something in Mara's chest closed like a fist. Don't answer that, she said. I'm not. Nico. I'm not answering it. But his hand was already around the phone, and his eyes had already gone somewhere else. That particular distance that settled over him whenever the other world called. The world of deals and danger, and everyone wanting something from him. She had spent 3 years learning the difference between when he was present and when he was already somewhere else. And right now, standing in their rain-streaked living room with the most important words of her life waiting in her throat, he was already somewhere else. Go, she said. Mara, just go. I'm not leaving because of a phone call. You were leaving before the phone rang. She turned back to the window. The city below was drowned and blinking. You made your decision before you walked into this room. You just came up here to perform the conversation. Silence. Then the sound of him picking up his jacket from the chair. I'll have someone bring the car around in the morning, he said. We can sit down and talk through the practical arrangements. I don't want this to be... Get out. Complicated. You deserve... Get out of my house. Mara, it's my house too. She spun around. Or have you already forgotten that part? The part where we built this together? The part where I sat in your corner every single time someone came for you? The part where I... She stopped herself, breathed, reset. Get out, Nico, call your car, go to her, but understand something. She held his eyes and did not waver. You're making a mistake right now that you will not be able to walk back from. He looked at her for 3 full seconds, and then he walked out. She heard the elevator doors open and close. She heard the building hum. She stood in the center of the 52nd floor, with rain swallowing the windows and her hands perfectly still at her sides. And she understood, with a clarity that felt almost surgical, that the woman she had been inside this marriage had just died in this room. What was left was something older, something that had been waiting a long time. She found her phone on the kitchen counter. She opened a text thread with no name. Just a number she had memorized years ago and never stored. Her thumb hovered. Then she typed, He walked out. I didn't tell him. I need more time. The reply came back in under a minute. You don't have more time. 24 hours, Mara. After that, I move. Her father's precision, her father's patience. Not infinite, never infinite, just long enough to feel that way until it ran out. She set the phone down on the marble counter and pressed both palms flat against the cold surface and stood there breathing, just breathing, until the shaking in her knees stopped. Then she straightened up, pulled her hair back, and went to find her coat. Nico Valenti did not take the main elevator. He took the service corridor down to the 31st floor, then crossed to the West Tower and came out through the casino level. Not because he needed to, but because he was a man who had built his entire life on the principle of never using the most obvious route. Old habit. The kind you don't lose even when the threat is abstract. He came out through the casino floor with his jacket buttoned and his phone in his hand, weaving through the slot machines and the cocktail waitresses and the tourists in their best outfits doing their worst decisions, and he felt the noise of it close around him like armor. This was his world. This was the world he understood. Not the marble penthouse and the silences that stretched too long, and a wife who looked at him sometimes like she was waiting for him to become someone he didn't know how to be. The black car was already at the curb when he came through the side entrance. His driver, Marco, didn't ask where. He already knew. Nico got in. The door closed. The rain hammered the roof of the car, and the lights of the strip smeared across the wet windows like something bleeding. He pulled out his phone and called her back. She picked up on the first ring, the way she always did. Like she had been holding the phone and waiting, which she probably had, because Celine Cruz was a woman who understood that availability was its own kind of power. She was 34 and ran the most exclusive private events operation in the Western Corridor, and knew everyone worth knowing and some people who were dangerous to know. and she had been sliding through the edges of Nico's world for 2 years before she slid into his life in a way that felt at the time like inevitability. "Tell me you're on your way," she said. "I'm on my way." "Did you?" "It's handled." A pause. "How handled?" "I walked out." He could hear her exhale, slow and satisfied, like someone who had been expecting a certain word and finally heard it. "Good," she said. "Come to the Bellagio. Private dining. I already ordered." He watched Las Vegas slide past the windows, wet and electric and indifferent. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. He ended the call. He did not let himself think about Mara standing at that window. He did not let himself hear the particular flatness in her voice when she said, "Get out of my house." Not crying, not screaming, which would have been easier, just that terrible calm, like a door being shut on something that would not reopen. He was good at not letting himself think about things. It was the core competency that had gotten him to the 52nd floor in the first place. Chess. The Bellagio's private dining level was accessed through a corridor that most guests never knew existed. Past the wine cellar, through a door that looked like part of the wall, down a short hallway carpeted in charcoal. No signage, no host station, just a series of rooms, each one sealed, each one swept for devices twice per evening. It was the kind of place where decisions were made that would only become public years later, if ever. Celine had the corner room. She was already seated when he arrived, one arm draped over the back of her chair, a glass of white wine in her other hand, wearing something dark red that she knew she looked extraordinary in because she wore it specifically when she needed him to stop thinking clearly. She had dark hair cut to her jaw and cheekbones that photographers followed around rooms, and she had the particular quality of a woman who had been underestimated enough times that she had learned to turn it into a weapon. She watched him cross the room and sit down across from her without standing to greet him. Another precise choice, calculated to remind him that she was not waiting on him. She was allowing him to arrive. "You look like you've been through something," she said. "It's raining." "It's more than that." She studied his face. She didn't take it well. She took it exactly how she took it. "It's done." "Is it?" He looked at her. "Yes." Celine swirled her wine. "Nico, I know you. You walk out of a room, but half of you stays behind. You're going to spend the next 3 days wondering if you made the right call." "I made the right call." She had that look, didn't she? That quiet, devastated look that makes you feel like a monster. He didn't answer. "She's very good at that look," Celine said, without particular malice, the way you would describe a tool someone uses. "She's been using it for 3 years to keep you at arm's length from everything you should be paying attention to. You said it yourself. She's never given you the full picture. She holds things back. You don't actually know who she is." "I know who she is." "Do you?" Celine set her glass down. "Because I've been looking into Mafia Boss." She said the last name the way you say a word you've been researching, with familiarity. "Not Mara Valenti, Mafia Boss. And I found some things, Nico, that I think you need to hear." Something moved at the back of his neck. A cold thing. "What kind of things?" he said. Celine leaned forward, elbows on the table, and her expression was all precision now, all business, all of the charm set aside for something sharper underneath. This was the version of her that had survived things he hadn't asked about yet. This was the version that wore dark red because it made men stop thinking. "The kind of things," she said, "that tell me your wife has been lying to you about everything that matters since the day you met her." The waiter arrived with the first course. He set the plates down with the practiced invisibility of someone paid to have no memory. Celine thanked him without looking at him. Nico sat across from her and felt the cold thing at the back of his neck start to spread, but he did not take out his phone. He did not call Mara back. He reached for his fork, and he listened, and the rain kept coming down outside, 30 stories above the street, and his wife stood somewhere in the city with something enormous waiting on her tongue, and he let the distance between them grow. Cade Rourke got to the penthouse 23 minutes after Nico left it. He had a key, not because Nico had given it to him for domestic reasons, but because Cade Rourke had keys to everything Nico Valenti owned, operated, or occasionally used as a meeting point. That was his function. Not bodyguard, not enforcer, not advisor. All of those things at different hours. But the actual function was this. Cade was the person Nico trusted to know where all the doors were. He was 46, former military, former private security, former enough things that the specifics had blurred into a general competence for managing danger. He had a wide face, a broken nose that had healed crooked, and the kind of stillness in his eyes that came from having been in situations where flinching cost you something you couldn't get back. He had worked for Nico for 9 years. In that time, he had seen marriages, deals, threats, close calls, and the slow accumulation of a man who was starting to outgrow the size of his own judgment. He had been trying, for the last 4 months, to tell Nico something. Nico had not been in a listening mood. He took the elevator to 52 and let himself in and found Mara in the kitchen with her coat on, a small bag on the counter, her phone face down, her expression somewhere he had never seen her expression go before. Not distress, not anger. Something resolved, something that had moved past the storm to the other side of it. "Mrs. Valenti," he said, "don't." She looked at him. "Not tonight." He stopped just inside the doorway. "Are you all right?" He walked out. "I know." She studied him for a moment. "You knew this was coming." "I suspected." "And you didn't say anything." He doesn't always want to hear things. Cade moved into the room carefully, the way you move around something that might be carrying more weight than it appears to. "I'm not here to defend him. I'm here because I need to tell you something, and I need you to not be somewhere else for the next 10 minutes while I say it." Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and unzipped her coat and draped it over the back of a kitchen stool and sat down. Her back was straight. Her hands were flat on the counter. "Talk," she said. He sat across from her. "I've been monitoring the situation between the Valenti organization and the Voss family," he said, "on Nico's behalf. He's been making moves in the East Coast corridor for about 8 months. Import lanes, property, some financial instruments that the Voss people would consider an encroachment." Mara said nothing. "He doesn't know about the connection," Cade said. "Between you and—" He stopped, rearranged. "He doesn't know your father's name is Alaric Voss." The silence that followed was very specific. It had edges. "How did you find out?" she said. "Not a question." "I'm good at my job." "How long have you known?" 6 weeks. She exhaled through her nose, something that might have been a laugh in different circumstances. "And you didn't tell him?" "I told you first." "I'm not sure that's better." "I wanted to give you the chance," Cade said, "because if I told him, I couldn't control what he did with it. And what he did with it could have started something that couldn't be unstarted." Mara pressed her fingers against the marble counter. "My father called tonight," she said. 24 hours. That's what he gave me. I bring Nico to the table or the Voss organization moves against everything Nico has built." Cade sat very still. "Everything," she repeated. He looked at the table between them. Then he looked up. "Nico doesn't understand what he's walking toward." "No," she said. "He doesn't. He needs to hear this from you." "I tried." Her voice was completely flat. "I was standing in this room trying to tell him, and his phone buzzed, and he looked at her name, and he chose. Right in front of me, Cade. He made the choice right in front of me, and I couldn't—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I have to go find him." "He's at the Bellagio." Of course he was. Of course Celine had already arranged something elegant and controlled in private. That was what she did. She created the environments where Nico made decisions that suited her, and she made those decisions feel like his own. Mara stood up, picked up her coat. "You're going there now?" Cade said. "I have to tell him who I am," she said. "Tonight. Not because I want to, not because I have any interest in saving this marriage after what he just did, but because there are people in this city who could get hurt if this goes wrong, and there are things at stake bigger than him cheating on me, and I am—" She stopped, breathed. "I am still Alaric Voss's daughter, and that means something whether Nico Valenti respects it or not." Cade stood. "I'll drive you." "I don't need—" "Mara." His voice was careful. Careful in the way people are careful when something fragile is also something important. "Let me drive you." She looked at him. Then she nodded. They went to the elevator together. The building hummed around them. The rain was still going. Harder now, if anything, the kind of rain that made Las Vegas look briefly like the desert it actually was. like the neon and the marble and the illusion of abundance had been temporarily washed away. Mara stood in the elevator with her hands in her pockets and her jaw set, and the ghost of the conversation she had never gotten to have pressing against her ribs like something trying to get out. She had one shot. She had 23 hours left of her father's patience. And somewhere in the Bellagio, the man she had married was sitting across from a woman who was filling his ears with whatever story served her best, pouring his glass full of half-truths while the clock ran out on everything Nico had built. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Mara Voss walked out into the rain. Haha. At the same moment, in the private dining room of the Bellagio, Selene Cruz was finishing a sentence that Nico would not be able to unhear. "The Voss family has been watching you for months," she said. Her wine glass was empty now. Her hands were calm on the table. "They consider your East Coast operation a direct challenge, and they have the reach to flatten you inside of 60 days. Your clubs, your routes, your legitimate fronts. All of it." She held his eyes. "And your wife, Mara, she is not some woman you rescued from nothing. She is Alaric Voss's daughter, the hidden one, the one nobody was supposed to know about." Nico had gone very still. "She's been in your house for 3 years," Selene said, "and she never told you." He said nothing. "She had every opportunity," Selene said. "She chose not to, which means either she was protecting you," she tilted her head, "or she was waiting for the right moment to use it." Nico's jaw was tight. His whiskey sat untouched. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you," Selene said. "I'm telling you because you deserve to walk into whatever comes next with your eyes open." She reached across the table and touched the back of his hand, just briefly, just precisely enough. "You've always been smarter than the room, Nico. Don't let her make you the last person to know your own story." He pulled his hand back, stood up. "I need to make a call," he said. He was already walking toward the door when his phone rang, Cade's name on the screen. He answered it. "She's on her way to you," Cade said without preamble. "And Nico, before she gets there, you need to hear this from me first. Everything Selene just told you? It's true. Mara is Alaric Voss's daughter. But the part Selene left out," he stopped for half a second. "The part Selene conveniently left out is that Mara's been trying to tell you for months. She's not here to use you. She came here to warn you. And she's pregnant." The corridor outside the private dining room was empty and carpeted and silent. Nico stood very still with the phone against his ear and the word pregnant expanding inside his chest like something with too much pressure behind it. "Where is she?" he said. 10 minutes out." He turned around. Selene was standing in the doorway of the dining room, leaning against the frame, watching him with an expression he had never quite read correctly before. Or maybe he had read it correctly and chosen not to believe it. Something hungry underneath the warmth, something calculating underneath the care. "Nico," she said, and smiled. "Come back inside." He looked at her, and for the first time in 7 months, he saw her clearly. He moved toward the doorway, not to go back inside, but to get past her, to get to the elevator, to get to his wife before she arrived and found him still standing in the restaurant where he had taken Selene to celebrate walking out of his marriage. But Selene stepped into the corridor as he reached her, and she put one hand on his chest, and she lifted her face to his, and she kissed him. It lasted 3 seconds. He pulled back. He looked past her. At the end of the corridor, just through the door that led to the main walkway, Mara stood perfectly still. She was soaked. Her coat was dark with rain. Her hair was plastered to her face, and her hands were at her sides, and she had clearly arrived at exactly the wrong moment and seen exactly the wrong thing. And she was looking at him with an expression that he had never, in 3 years of marriage, in every fight they had ever had, in every silence that had stretched too long, he had never seen on her face before. It was not heartbreak. Heartbreak he could have worked with. It was something colder, something older. The expression of a person who has just received the final piece of evidence they needed and found that it confirms everything they feared. "Mara?" He stepped around Selene, hand out. "That's not—" "I know what it is," she said. Her voice was completely quiet. Rain dripped from the hem of her coat onto the carpeted floor. "I came to save us both," she said. "But you already made your choice." And she turned and walked back into the storm. The corridor hummed under the weight of the silence she left behind. Nico stood with his hand still extended toward the space where she had been and felt the precise, irreversible sensation of something closing. Not slowly, not gently, but with the clean and final weight of a vault door. Celine touched his shoulder from behind. He did not move. Somewhere in the parking structure beneath the Bellagio, a black sedan was pulling toward the exit. And Nico Valenti, who had built his entire life on never being the last person to understand the room, had just become exactly that. The sedan pulled out of the Bellagio parking structure and into the rain, and Mara did not look back. She sat in the back seat with her hands in her lap, and her wet coat soaking through the leather, and she watched the strip blur past the window, all that light smearing in the downpour, pink and gold and white, the city performing its permanent illusion of abundance for nobody in particular. And she did not cry. She had cried already. She had done her crying in the elevator on the way down, 30 seconds of it, quiet and controlled, and then she had pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth and stopped it the way you stop bleeding, with pressure and decision. Now there was only the rain and the sound of the wipers and the city going past. "Where to?" the driver asked. She didn't answer right away. She was calculating, not feeling, calculating. Because feeling right now would cost her something she could not afford to spend. She had 19 hours left of her father's patience and a husband who had just kissed another woman in a hotel corridor while she stood there soaked to the skin and carrying his child, and the Voss organization was positioned to destroy everything Nico had built. And if she let herself sit inside the emotion of this moment, she would not be functional. And she needed to be functional. "The Meridian," she said, "on Flamingo." The driver nodded. She pulled out her phone, opened the thread with her father's number, stared at the last message. "You don't have more time. 24 hours, Mara. After that, I move." And typed back, "He didn't hear me. I need a face-to-face. Tonight." She hit send, then she leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes and let the car carry her through the storm. The Meridian was not a casino and it was not a hotel. It was a private residential tower that had been built 12 years ago by a development company that no longer officially existed, on a block that most people drove past without registering. The lobby had no signage. The staff had NDAs. The 47th floor had been maintained at Alaric Voss's expense for 11 years as a staging point. Not a home, not exactly, but a place where the infrastructure of his world could operate without the inconvenience of visibility. Mara had a key card she had not used in 14 months. It still worked. She went up alone. The elevator was slower than the Bellagio's, quieter, and it smelled faintly of something expensive and cold, like money kept in climate control. She stood in it and looked at her own reflection in the brushed steel doors and barely recognized the woman looking back. Coat dark with water, hair destroyed by the rain. Eyes that had gone very flat and very focused in the way they went when she was running on something harder than ordinary emotion. She looked like her father. She had always hated that. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. It was large and sparse and lit at low levels. Furniture selected for function rather than comfort. Everything in charcoal and gray and the particular beige of expensive restraint. It smelled like her childhood, which was to say it smelled like nothing, because Alaric Voss had spent his entire life ensuring that the spaces he occupied gave nothing away. He was standing at the window. Of course he was. Alaric Voss was 63 years old and looked 55 on a bad day, and looked like a sculpture on a good one. He was tall, with the posture of a man who had spent his whole life refusing to let gravity win. Silver hair. A face with deep lines in it that didn't suggest age so much as pressure. The physical record of decades of decisions made at altitudes that thinned the air. He was wearing a dark suit at 11:30 at night because Alaric Voss did not own casual clothing. He had once told Mara, when she was 12, that the way a person dressed was the first negotiation of every day, and he had never lost that negotiation in his life. He turned when she came in. He looked at her for 2 seconds, the coat, the hair, the particular set of her jaw. "Sit down," he said. "I'm not going to—" "Mara, sit down." She sat. He crossed to the bar. Not the ornate kind, just a clean counter with 3 bottles and 2 glasses, and poured water into a glass and brought it to her. Not whiskey, not wine. Water, because he had clocked the pregnancy 4 weeks ago through a source she had not identified yet, and had said nothing about it, and this was how Alaric Voss acknowledged things he wasn't supposed to know, by adjusting his behavior without explanation and waiting for you to figure out the math. She took the water. He walked out, she said. I know. I tried to tell him tonight. He didn't listen. I know that too. Then you also know that I am out of moves, she said. He's not at the table. He's at the Bellagio with a woman who has been feeding him information about our family. I don't know how much she knows or where she's getting it, but she knew enough tonight to tell him things that... She stopped, pressed her mouth together. He's going to come looking for me. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. And whatever state he's in when he does, it's going to be reactive. He's going to be angry and off balance, and you know what Nico does when he's off balance. He makes aggressive moves, Alaric said. He sat across from her, unhurried. Yes, which plays directly into the position I've been building. I know. So the question is whether you still want to prevent this. He looked at her with those flat gray eyes that she had inherited and spent her entire adult life trying to soften. Because from where I sit, Mara, the marriage is over. The man showed you who he is tonight. You have a child coming. You have a name that opens every door on the eastern seaboard. The question of why you are still trying to protect someone who chose another woman over you is one I have been sitting with for several hours. Nitoir Singh. Mara looked at the water glass in her hands. It's not about protecting him, she said. Then what is it about? It's about what happens to the people around him when you move. She looked up. His lieutenant, Cade Rourke. He's been loyal. He's been trying to do the right thing. His staff, his legitimate operations. There are 400 people employed in those buildings who don't know anything about the import lanes, who just come to work and cash their checks. And there is... She stopped. Alaric waited. There is a child, she said quietly. Nico's child, who will grow up knowing either that her parents went to war with each other or that her mother tried to stop it and couldn't. She met her father's eyes. I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting the story she'll grow up with. Alaric was quiet for a long moment. He had the ability, which Mara had never fully adapted to, of being silent in a way that felt active rather than empty, like he was processing at a depth that didn't require expression. 12 hours, he said finally. Father, that's the adjustment. 12 hours from now, not 24. If Nico Valenti is not sitting across from me with a willingness to negotiate by 11 tomorrow morning, I began. And Mara, he leaned forward slightly. I will not be moved again after this. You understand? She understood. She stood up. Set the water glass on the table. There's something else, she said. The woman, Celine Cruz. She knew things about our family that she shouldn't have access to. Specific things. I want to know where she's getting her information. Something shifted in Alaric's expression. Barely. A tightening around the eyes. We can discuss that, he said. No. Tell me now. Mara. She knew I was your daughter, Father. She knew the name Voss. She knew about the East Coast operation. That's not public information. That's not something you find on a background check. Mara held his gaze and did not let it go. Who is she? Alaric stood, straightened his jacket, a habit she recognized, the motion he made when buying exactly 2 seconds. She is someone who is paid to create proximity to Nico Valenti, he said. The room went very still. By whom? Mara said. By people who want the Valenti operation disrupted, who have interests in the Eastern Corridor that conflict with both our families and Nico's. He moved to the window, the same window position she had found him in when she arrived, which meant it was his thinking position, which meant he had already been thinking about this. Celine Cruz is not simply a woman your husband became infatuated with. She is a placement. She was engineered into his life. Mara stood very still. And you knew this. I became aware of it. When? 3 months ago. 3 months. Her voice did not rise. It was somehow worse that it didn't. You knew for 3 months that someone had deliberately inserted a woman into my marriage to destabilize it, and you said nothing to me. I was monitoring the situation. She destroyed my marriage tonight. The control cracked for exactly 1 second. 1 second where Mara's voice went tight and something raw got through. Then it sealed again. She stood in a hotel corridor and kissed my husband in front of me. She has been in his ear for 7 months telling him I'm ordinary and untrustworthy and not worth his time. And you knew. You watched it happen. Alaric turned from the window. His expression was the one she knew worst, the one that was not without feeling but that placed feeling several rooms away from the current conversation. I made a strategic decision. You made a decision that cost me my family. You don't know yet what it cost. I know what it cost tonight. He looked at her for a long moment. In the low light of the apartment, with the rain still going outside, he looked older than he had when she walked in. Not old. Alaric Voss would never look old, but like a man who had made a calculation and was now beginning to understand its full dimensions. "Who are they?" she said. "The people who paid for Celine. A consortium. Eastern interests. You don't need the names yet. I'll need them eventually." "Yes," he said. "You will." She moved toward the elevator, stopped with her hand on the wall panel. "I'll get him to the table," she said. "Not for the alliance. Not for you. Because there is a child who deserves to know that at least one of her parents tried to stop the world from burning before she was born." She pressed the button. The elevator opened. "And when this is done, Father, when whatever happens next has happened, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about the things you've withheld from me. And you're not going to manage that conversation. Do you understand?" Alaric said nothing, which, from Alaric Voss, was the same as yes. Nico got back to the penthouse at 12:47 in the morning. He knew she was gone before the elevator opened. There was a particular quality to an empty space that he had learned over 15 years of walking into rooms where someone might be waiting, and this space had it. Still, finished, like a conversation that had concluded while he wasn't present. He walked through the apartment anyway. Kitchen, her water glass in the drying rack, washed. Bedroom, closet open, a section of it cleared. Not everything. She hadn't packed to leave permanently. She had taken what she needed for 1 or 2 nights, which meant she was coming back, or she expected something to be resolved before she had to decide whether to come back. He stood in the bedroom doorway for a while. He called her number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. What would he say? Every version of the sentence that formed in his head felt insufficient, and some of them felt dishonest, and he was done, after tonight, being dishonest about the dimensions of what he had done. He went to the living room, poured himself the whiskey he hadn't touched at the Bellagio, sat on the white sectional that they had argued about buying, and looked at the rain on the glass and thought about a word. Pregnant. Kate had said it in a corridor, and he had not asked for confirmation because he had not needed to. Because the math was there if you looked at it, the nausea she had mentioned 3 times this week, the way she had stopped drinking without explaining why, the pregnancy test she had left on the coffee table 6 weeks ago and then quietly removed without ever starting the conversation. He had been careful not to start either, because starting it would have required him to stop moving long enough to exist inside the life they had built together, and he had not been willing to do that. He had not been willing to slow down. And now Alaric Voss was somewhere in this city with 24 hours of patience that were ticking down, and his wife was gone, and the woman he had chosen instead had been placed in his life like a loaded mechanism by people he didn't have names for yet. And he was sitting on a sectional he had argued about in a marriage he had treated like an inconvenience. He picked up his phone and called Cade. It rang once. "Where is she?" Nico said. "Somewhere safe. I don't know the exact location." "Cade, she didn't tell me where she was going, Nico. She's not obligated to." A pause. "You need to understand what's in motion right now. Alaric Voss, East Coast Corridor, 24 hours. I understand." Less than 24 now. Nico pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose. "She came to tell me. Tonight. That's what she was trying to tell me." "Yes. And instead He stopped. "Yes," Cade said. "How long have you known?" "About her being Voss's daughter? 6 weeks?" The answer was flat and even, which meant Cade had been prepared for this question and had decided on honesty over self-preservation, which was why Nico had kept him for 9 years. "I found out through a financial trail. I came to her first. I gave her the chance to tell you herself." "Why?" "Because the way information lands depends on who delivers it, and I thought it would land better from her." A pause. I was right about that. I was wrong about the timing. Nico was quiet. Celine Cruz, he said. What about her? She knew. She told me before I could get to Mara. She already had the information. Mara's name, the Voss connection, the Eastern operation. He set his glass down on the coffee table with a sound that was too loud for the room. Nobody gets that information by accident. Where is she getting it? A longer pause, the kind that meant Cade was deciding how much to say. Cade? I've been looking at her for the last 4 months, Cade said. Her financial history, her client list, there are deposits that don't match her event business. Regular? Clean. But too clean. The kind of clean that means someone knows how to structure transactions. Someone is paying her. Someone has been paying her for the better part of a year, Cade said. I don't have the source yet. But Nico. The timing matches. The payment started right around when she made contact with you. The rain hammered those windows. Nico sat with his phone against his ear and felt something he almost never felt. Not fear, not exactly, but the cold clarity of a man who has just understood that he is standing inside a trap that was built specifically for him and has been standing in it for 7 months and only just now noticed the walls. Get me a name, he said. By morning. I'm already working on it. And find Mara. Another pause. Nico, Cade said. She's not going to want to see you tonight. I know. Let her? I know, Cade. Find her anyway. I'm not going to call her. I just need to know she's safe. He stood up from the couch, walked to the window. The city below was still drowning. And get me on Alaric Voss's schedule. Whatever it takes. Whatever I have to offer as an opening position. You want to go to him first? He's the one with the clock running. Nico pressed his hand flat against the glass. Cold. Real. The exact opposite of everything tonight had felt. The only move I have left is to go in with nothing and let him see it. No leverage, no counterplay, just the truth about what I didn't know and what I'm willing to do about it. That's not how you usually operate. No, Nico said. It's not. He ended the call. He stayed at the window for a long time. The rain started to ease, not stop, just lighten. And the neon below re-emerged through the wet, bleeding its colors back into the street. And he watched it and thought about a woman standing in a hotel corridor with rain dripping from the hem of her coat, looking at him with the expression of someone who had just received the last piece of evidence they needed. I came to save us both. But you already made your choice. He had. He had made it before he knew what he was choosing. He had made it by not asking the right questions, by preferring the version of Mara that required nothing of him. The quiet wife, the background presence, the woman he had told himself he had rescued from nothing, which was a story he had told because it made him the protagonist, and that was a role he had always cast himself in. He had never once asked himself what she might have rescued herself from before she met him. He turned away from the window. There was work to do. Not redemption. He was clear-eyed enough to understand that redemption was not a single night's work, if it was achievable at all. But there was damage to understand, and truth to locate, and a meeting to arrange with a man who had spent 60 years building something that Nico had been carelessly encroaching on for 8 months without knowing who owned the ground he was walking across. He went to his desk. He opened his laptop. He started making calls. At 2 a.m, in a suite at the Meridian that smelled like climate-controlled silence, Mara lay on top of the covers with her shoes off and her phone on her chest and stared at the ceiling. She had taken 3 sips of water. She had not eaten since the first course at a dinner she had left early. She was aware of the baby in the particular way she had been aware of it since 6 weeks ago, not as a medical fact, but as a presence, a weight of potential, something real that was happening inside her body regardless of what was happening outside of it. Her phone buzzed. Not Nico. She had declined his call an hour ago and felt nothing. The number on the screen was one she didn't recognize. She answered it. Mara Voss? A woman's voice. Smooth. The careful smoothness of someone who had practiced sounding unconcerned. I think we should talk. Mara sat up. Who is this? She said. You know who this is. She did. She had heard that voice twice tonight, once through a corridor wall, once in her own memory on the way to the Meridian. She had spent 6 blocks of the car ride home memorizing the pitch and cadence of it, a voice she had constructed in her imagination over 4 months of knowing something was wrong without having a face or a name to put to the wrongness. "Celine," she said. "There she is." The smile in the voice was not warm. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up. What do you want?" "I want you to understand something before tomorrow gets complicated." A pause. A sound of movement. Glass being set down, maybe. "I'm not your enemy, Mara. I was a tool. Somebody else's tool. I was paid to get close to your husband, and I did my job. That's all this was." Mara stood up from the bed, moved to the window. "You expect me to thank you for explaining that?" "I expect you to be smart enough to hear what I'm actually telling you." The smoothness in Celine's voice shifted, something under it tightening. "The people who paid me are not finished with Nico Valenti. Getting him away from you was step one. Isolating him from his most stable source of information and support was step one. What comes next is worse." Mara was very still. "What comes next?" she said. "I don't have all of it. I was given what I needed and no more." A pause. "But I know they've been in contact with someone inside the Voss organization, someone close to your father. They're not just going after Nico. They're trying to accelerate the conflict between Valenti and Voss. Use it, ride it. Let the two organizations destroy each other and then walk into the space that's left." The ceiling of the room felt lower than it had a minute ago. "Why are you telling me this?" Mara said. "Because I made a calculation," Celine said. "I looked at the board, and I looked at the players, and I looked at who is most likely to still be standing at the end of this, and it isn't the people who paid me, and it isn't your husband, and it isn't your father." The pause that followed was precise. "It's you. And I am a woman who bets on the person most likely to survive." Mara pressed her hand against the cold window glass. "I want a name," she said. "The people who paid you. I want one name." "I'll send it to this number in an hour," Celine said. "After that, whatever you do with it is your business." And Mara, a beat. "Whatever you think of me for what it's worth, I didn't expect to like you. Most men's wives are boring. You're not boring." She ended the call. Mara stood at the window with the phone in her hand and the rain outside finally slowing to something that looked like drizzle. The city below re-emerging in pieces, wet and bright and indifferent. Someone inside the Voss organization, close to her father. She looked at the phone in her hand. Then she opened her contacts, found the unsaved number, her father's number. She did not call him, not yet, because Alaric Voss was 63 years old and had built a dynasty on the principle of controlling information flow, and if someone inside his organization had been turned, he would manage the revelation of that information the same way he managed everything, by using it as a lever before she could use it as a warning. She needed to know the name first. She needed to know who was close enough to her father to be fed intelligence about the Voss family, and trusted enough by an outside consortium to be used as a relay, before she could figure out what move to make next. She sat on the edge of the bed. She set a timer on her phone for 55 minutes. She closed her eyes. Not to sleep, she would not sleep tonight. But because there was a calculation to run and she needed to run it in the dark, away from the light and the rain and the sound of a city that had never once cared about any of them, and she needed to do it fast, because the clock on her father's patience had ticked from 12 hours to 11, and Nico Valenti was somewhere across the city making phone calls he didn't understand. And somewhere between them was a name that could change the entire shape of... The name came through at 3:14 in the morning. Not a text. A photograph. Shot close, slightly blurred at the edges the way photos taken in dim light always are. But clear enough in the center where it mattered. A document, 2 pages, what looked like a financial transfer record with routing numbers and a name at the top of the authorization column. Mara stared at it for a long time. The name was Daniel Voss, her cousin, her father's nephew, the only child of Alaric's younger brother who had died 11 years ago of causes that the family had never discussed with complete honesty. Daniel was 38. He had a seat on the Voss operational board. He had access to routing infrastructure, communication logs, personnel schedules. He had been present at every major strategic meeting for the last 4 years because Alaric had been grooming him as a secondary successor, not the primary. That was always going to be Mara, hidden or not, but a contingency, a loyal backup. Loyal. She set the phone face down on the bed and pressed both hands against the tops of her thighs and sat with it, Daniel Voss had been feeding information to an outside consortium, had told them about Mara's identity, had given them the intelligence they needed to build Celine Cruz into a weapon and point her at Nico, had been sitting in her father's meetings and eating her father's trust and using it to accelerate a war that would leave both the Valenti and Voss organizations weakened enough for a third party to walk into the gap. She picked the phone back up. She called Celine's number. It rang twice. "You got it," Celine said. Not a question. "Daniel Voss," Mara said. "Yes." "How long?" 18 months, maybe longer. I only have documentation going back 18. "Who does he represent?" "On the other side." "A holding group, registered in Luxembourg. The actual principals are—" "I don't have clean names, Mara. I have structures, shell layers. Whoever they are, they're very good at not being found. But Daniel is findable." "Daniel is very findable," Celine said. Mara stood up, walked to the window. The rain had stopped. Las Vegas below was doing its post-storm thing, the streets catching all that light and throwing it back twice as bright, everything washed and gleaming and fake. "Why didn't you come to me with this sooner?" she said. "Because sooner you were the Mark's wife, now you're something else." "What am I now?" "The only person in this situation who knows the full board," Celine said. "Your father doesn't know about Daniel. Nico doesn't know about the consortium. Nobody has the complete picture except you." A pause. "That's either a very powerful position or a very dangerous one." "It's both," Mara said. She ended the call. She stood at the window with the city below her and did the things she had been trained since childhood to do in moments of maximum complexity. She stripped the emotion out of the room entirely and looked at only the structure, the skeleton of the situation, clean of everything personal. Daniel had flipped. Daniel had been feeding the consortium. The consortium had engineered Celine to fracture the Valenti-Voss proximity before any alliance could form, because an alliance between those two organizations would have been untouchable, and untouchable was bad for whatever the consortium was building in the Eastern Corridor. The plan was working. Nico had walked out on her. Her father's clock was running. The two organizations were 48 hours from open conflict. But Daniel didn't know she knew. That was the only card she had. She reached for her coat. She found Cade's number and called it at 3:31. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he hadn't been sleeping either. "I need you to set up a meeting," she said. "Not with Nico. With Daniel Voss." A pause. "Alaric's Daniel." "Yes." "Mara, what?" "I need it to look casual. Not arranged. Can you do that?" "I can do most things," Cade said carefully. "But if you're telling me what I think you're telling me, I'm not telling you anything yet. I'm asking you to make a call. Tell him Mara Voss wants a family conversation. Tell him she's frightened and she needs someone from the family who isn't her father." She paused. "He'll come. He'll think it's an opportunity." Another pause. Longer this time. "When?" 7 this morning, before my father's people start the day." She looked at the city. "There's a breakfast place on West Sahara, the Copper Rail, private booths in the back. Tell him there." "All right," Cade said. He didn't ask more questions, which was one of the things that made him valuable. "And Nico? What about him?" "He's been up all night. He's been making calls. He asked me to find you." "I know." "He wants to fix it, Mara. I know that too." She turned away from the window. "There's nothing for him to fix yet. The problem isn't our marriage. The problem is Daniel and the consortium and the fact that my father has 11 hours left of patience and doesn't know that his own organization has been bleeding intelligence for 18 months. She pulled on her coat. "Tell Nico to stay where he is. Tell him I'm working. Tell him if he trusts me, if he has ever, one time in 3 years, trusted me, to give me until 8 this morning." She could hear Cade processing this. "I'll tell him," he said. She ended the call and picked up her bag and walked to the elevator and went down through the silent building and out through the lobby into a Las Vegas night that smelled of rain and ozone and the particular clean slate feeling that comes after a storm when everything terrible has been washed to the surface and is just sitting there, visible, waiting to be dealt with. The Copper Rail opened at 6. Mara was there at 5:55. Sitting in the back booth with coffee she wasn't going to drink. and a clear line of sight to the front door. The place was the opposite of the world she had been moving through all night. Vinyl seats, laminate tables, a cook visible through the pass-through window, the sound of a morning news program on a television mounted too high on the wall, real and ordinary and completely indifferent to the Voss family and everything that name carried. She had always liked places like this. She had grown up in places like this. Before Alaric found her, before the truth of her parentage had been explained and the world had rearranged itself around a bloodline she hadn't known she was carrying. She had been 11 years old, living with her mother in a 2-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia. And then Alaric Voss had come to the door, and her mother had made her sit in her room while they talked in the kitchen for 2 hours. And when Mara came out, her mother's face had the particular emptiness of someone who has just been paid a very large amount of money to relinquish something, and her life had changed. She did not let herself live inside that memory for long. The door opened at 7:04. Daniel Voss was a large man, broad through the shoulders, his father's build, with Alaric's gray eyes and a face that was softer than Alaric's, less structured. The face of a man who had grown up in the orbit of power without having had to generate any of his own. He was wearing a jacket over a button-down, which meant he had dressed quickly when Cade called. He looked, when he came through the door and spotted her in the back booth, like a man who was arranging his expression from the inside, putting a look of concern on top of something else. Mara recognized that look. She had seen it on her father's face her entire life. She stood halfway, not all the way, just enough to signal that this was not a formal meeting, that she was playing the frightened version of herself, and he slid into the seat across from her and put his hands on the table and said, "Mara, tell me what's going on." She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that a flicker of something moved across his face. Not concern, the other thing, the thing underneath. He covered it fast. "I'm scared," she said. "Alaric is going to move against Nico and I can't stop it and I don't know what to do." "Come to the family," he said, immediately. "Come back in from the cold. You've been out here alone too long. Let us protect you. Let us." She noted it. "Not let me. Not let your father. Let us," as if the family were a unit with a shared position that he was representing. "He'll hurt Nico," she said. "Nico Valenti is a problem that needs to be resolved," Daniel said. His voice was warm, the careful warmth of a person managing someone they consider manageable. "The encroachment on the eastern corridor can't be allowed to stand. Alaric won't back down from that. What if I could get Nico to back down first? Can you? Maybe, if I had time." "You don't have time, Mara. You know that. What if I could extend it?" She leaned forward, let her voice drop slightly, played the thing she needed him to believe, that she was desperate, that she was reaching. "Daniel, you have influence with Alaric. You're the only one who does besides me. If you told him you needed more time to assess the situation, he'd listen to you. He trusts you." Something happened in Daniel's eyes then. It was very small, and it lasted less than a second. A satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of someone being asked for help. The satisfaction of someone watching a plan unfold exactly as predicted. The satisfaction of someone who had calculated that this conversation would happen and was now watching their calculation confirmed. He didn't know she had seen it. "I'll do what I can," he said. "But Mara, you have to be honest with me. Is there something Alaric should know? Something you've been holding back about your relationship with Valenti?" There it is. He wasn't offering help. He was harvesting information. He wanted to know what she knew, what she had told Nico, what intelligence existed in the space between the two organizations that hadn't been accounted for in whatever plan the consortium was running. She sat back. She let her hands rest flat on the table and looked at her cousin across the laminate surface of a diner booth and felt something harden inside her chest that had been soft and uncertain all night. Something that stopped being sad and started being something else. "Yes," she said, "there is something Alaric should know." "What is it?" "He should know," she said, "that you've been selling him out for 18 months. The silence that followed was the kind that has physical weight. Daniel's face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, recalculation, denial, and then the decision to try to recover. "I don't know what you think you—" She put her phone on the table between them. Face up. The photograph Celine had sent her already on screen. The document with the routing numbers and the authorization column and his name at the top of it. He looked at it. His face went still. The performed concern drained out of it entirely, and what was left was something she had not seen from him before, something without warmth or cover, something that was simply calculating, like watching a mask finish falling. "Where did you get that?" he said. "Does it matter?" "Mara." His voice had changed. The warmth was completely gone. "You don't understand what you're in the middle of." "I understand exactly what I'm in the middle of," she said. "You turned. Someone offered you something. Money, position, a seat at a different table. And you sold your family's intelligence to a Luxembourg consortium that engineered a woman into my husband's life to fracture any alliance between Valenti and Voss, because a combined operation would have been too strong for them to compete with in the Eastern Corridor." She held his eyes. "How am I doing?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back against the vinyl seat, and the last of the performance left his body, and he crossed his arms, and he looked at her the way a man looks at a problem he is reconfiguring his response to in real time. "You're smarter than Alaric gives you credit for," he said. "Everyone is smarter than Alaric gives them credit for. That's his only real weakness." She pulled the phone back across the table. "Who are they?" "The principals behind the consortium." "I'm not going to tell you that." "Daniel, I'm not going to tell you because it won't help you," he said. "You think exposing me to Alaric solves this. It doesn't. The mechanism is already running. The consortium doesn't need me anymore. I gave them everything they needed months ago. The intelligence has been transferred. Celine has done her job. What's coming next doesn't require my participation." She stared at him. "What's coming next?" He was quiet. "Daniel, what is coming next?" He looked at the table, then at her. And she saw, not remorse. She didn't think Daniel was built for remorse, but something adjacent to it. The expression of a man who had made a transaction and was only now understanding the full cost of it. "There's a meeting," he said, "tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Your father's people and Nico's people. A preliminary contact before any formal sit-down. Neutral ground. It was designed to be the first step toward the kind of conflict that can't be walked back from." He paused. "It was designed to go wrong." "What does that mean?" "It means someone will be there who isn't supposed to be there. Someone who will do something that both sides will interpret as aggression from the other." He stopped again. "After that, it doesn't matter what Alaric decides or what Nico decides. The reaction is automatic." Mara sat very still. "You have to stop the meeting," she said. "I can't stop anything." "You set it up." "I facilitated the contact. I don't control the mechanism." He leaned forward, lowered his voice. "Mara, listen to me. Walk away from this. Take your child and walk away from both of them. From Nico and from Alaric. Whatever you think you can do in the next..." He checked his watch. 9 hours. You can't do it. The machine is bigger than you." She picked up her phone, stood up. "You're wrong," she said. "Mara, you're wrong about something fundamental." She looked down at him. "You think the machine is bigger than me because you've never seen me operate at full capacity. Neither has Alaric. Neither has Nico." She buttoned her coat. "Every single person in this situation has spent 3 years looking at a woman they believed was ordinary, quiet, hidden. That was a choice I made. Today I'm making a different one." She left $40 on the table for coffee she hadn't touched. She walked to the door. Behind her, Daniel said her name one more time. She didn't turn around. Outside, the morning was coming in. Las Vegas at dawn looked like a hangover. The neon faded against a sky going gray and pink. The streets still wet from the night before. The city in the transition between what it had been at midnight and whatever it was pretending to be by 9 a.m. She stood on the sidewalk and opened her contacts and found Cade's name and called it. He answered immediately. "How did it go?" He confirmed the meeting tomorrow at 10. "It's been engineered to trigger a conflict. Someone's going to be there who doesn't belong." She started walking. No destination yet. She needed to move while she thought. "I need Nico. I'll get him. Not on the phone. In person. I need to be in the same room with him." "Where?" She thought about it. Not the penthouse. That was Nico's geography, and she needed neutral ground, and she needed somewhere that neither of their father's organizations had operational presence. "The Copper Rail. West Sahara. Give me 40 minutes. Done." "Cade?" She stopped walking. A delivery truck went past, slow and loud, spraying leftover rainwater from the gutter. Is he actually willing to hear me? Not manage the situation, not calculate the response. Hear me? A pause, the kind that meant Cade was choosing his words. Last night changed something in him, Cade said. I've worked for this man for 9 years, and I have never heard him sound the way he sounded at 2 in the morning. Whatever you need from him today, I think he'll give it. She started walking again. He may not get the chance, she said, if I can't figure out who is going to be in that room at 10 tomorrow morning. I can dig. I know someone who might already have the answer. She flagged a cab. It pulled over. Meet me at the copper rail, both of you, 40 minutes. She got into the cab, gave the driver the address of the Meridian first. She needed the file she had left on the bed, the one with the routing numbers, the one that was the only physical evidence she had of Daniel's involvement, and then the copper rail. The driver pulled out. She sat in the back seat of a cab in a Las Vegas dawn and looked at her phone and opened her text thread with her father's number and stared at it and did not type anything yet, because what she had to say to Alaric Voss could not be said over text, and could not be said until she had Nico in the same room and had confirmed that he was willing to do what she needed him to do, and could not be said without the knowledge of who the third party at tomorrow's meeting was going to be. Because walking into Alaric Voss's presence with an incomplete picture was the one strategic error she got back to the copper rail at 7:43. Nico was already there. He was sitting in the back booth, not the one she had used with Daniel, the one across from it, facing the door, because Nico Valenti had never in his adult life sat with his back to an entrance. He had a coffee in front of him that he wasn't drinking, and his jacket was off, and his shirt was wrinkled in the specific way shirts get wrinkled when you have been wearing them since the previous afternoon and have not slept. The serpent tattoo on his neck looked starker than usual in the morning light. His eyes found her the moment she came through the door. He didn't stand. He didn't perform anything. He just looked at her. She crossed the diner and sat down across from him and put the file folder on the table between them and looked back. Cade was in the corner booth near the front, far enough to give them distance, close enough if the distance became a problem. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Nico said, I'm sorry. I know, not for the marriage. I'll be sorry for the marriage I'll carry that for a long time. I mean, for last night specifically, for the hallway. You came to tell me the truth and Nico. She cut through it, not unkindly, just with the precision of someone who does not have the time for the conversation. She would need to have this conversation correctly. There are 9 hours until my father moves. There is a meeting tomorrow at 10 that has been arranged to trigger a war between your organization and his. And there is someone inside the Voss family who has been feeding intelligence to the people who built Celine Cruz and pointed her at you. He was very still. She opened the folder, pushed the document across the table. He looked at it, at the name. Daniel Voss, he said. My cousin. My father's operational board. She watched him read. He's been running intelligence to a Luxembourg consortium for 18 months. Everything they needed to engineer the fracture between us, they got through him. He gave them the Voss family infrastructure. He gave them me. He gave them enough information about your Eastern Corridor operation that they could build a narrative Celine could use to get into your head. She paused. They needed us at war. They needed both organizations weakened. Whatever they're building in the Eastern Corridor, it requires the space that a Valenti-Voss conflict would create. Nico looked up from the document. His jaw was tight. The particular tightness of a man who is processing fury at a frequency that doesn't register as expression. Where is Daniel now? He said. I don't know. He left the diner after me. He knows I have this. She tapped the folder. He'll be trying to reach his principals, or he'll run. He won't run, Nico said. Running acknowledges what he did. He'll try to get ahead of it. He'll go to Alaric first and frame the narrative before you can. She looked at him. You're right, she said, which means we have less time than 9 hours. Yes. He pushed the document back across the table, picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking it. His hands were not shaking. She would have expected them to shake, given everything, but they weren't. His hands were very still, which was, she realized, the most dangerous version of Nico. Not the loud version, not the reactive version, the still one. Tell me what you need, he said. She looked at him across the laminate table in the morning light of a diner on West Sahara, with the television in the corner running weather, and the cook moving around behind the pass-through, and the smell of coffee and bacon grease in the air. And she thought about 3 years of a marriage that had been real and not real in equal measure. And she thought about a child who would need the world to not be on fire when she arrived in it, and she breathed. "I need you to come with me to my father," she said. "Not to negotiate, not to deal. Just to sit across from him and tell him the truth, what you knew, what you didn't know, and what you're willing to stop doing. And I need you to let me handle the Daniel piece." She held his eyes. "Can you do that?" He looked at her for a long time. "Yes," he said. "If he comes at you, I'll hold." "He will come at you, Nico. Alaric doesn't do anything softly. He'll hit every point of weakness he can find, and he'll do it in the first 3 minutes, because he wants to see how you handle pressure before he decides whether you're worth talking to. I know how men like your father operate." "You don't," she said, without cruelty. "Not like him specifically. He's not like anyone you've dealt with before. He's patient in a way that feels like a weapon." She picked up the folder. "But that's also why Daniel thought he could run this play for 18 months without being caught. Alaric's patience looks like blindness if you don't know what you're watching." Kate appeared at the edge of her peripheral vision, moving from his corner booth toward them with his phone in his hand and his face carrying something she had learned to read over one night. The look of a man who has just received information that changes the shape of the next hour. He reached the table and put his phone face down and said, "Daniel Voss arrived at the Meridian 14 minutes ago." Mara's stomach tightened. "He went to Alaric," she said. "The Meridian is your father's location?" Nico asked. "Yes." She was already standing, folder under her arm, coat half on. "He's going to get there first and frame it. He'll tell Alaric I'm compromised, that I've been feeding Nico information, that I'm the leak." She looked at Cade. "How long to the Meridian?" 8 minutes if we move now." "Then we move now." She was already at the door. The elevator to the 47th floor felt slower than it had at 2 in the morning. Mara stood in it with Nico on her left and Cade on her right and watched the numbers climb and felt her pulse in her throat. Not panic, not quite, but the physiological reality of someone whose body understood the stakes, even while the mind was trying to stay above them. Nico said nothing. He was doing the still thing. She could feel it coming off him like a frequency. The elevator opened. Alaric Voss was standing in the center of the apartment. Daniel was standing 6 feet to his left, near the window, with his arms crossed, and his face already arranged into the expression of a man who has recently delivered difficult news and is managing the aftermath of it with practiced grief. 2 men she didn't recognize stood near the far wall, not staff. The specific stillness of security. Alaric's eyes went to her, then to Nico, then back to her. "Mara," he said. "Whatever he told you," she said, walking into the room, "he told you first because he wanted to shape it." "She's been communicating with Valenti," Daniel said. His voice was controlled and sad in the particular way of someone performing sadness. "For longer than tonight. I've had concerns for months, Uncle. I should have come to you sooner. I take responsibility for—" "Daniel." She turned to look at him directly. "Stop." He met her eyes. Something moved in his that she recognized. The flicker of a man recalculating how much she actually has versus how much she's bluffing. She opened the folder. She crossed the room and held the document out to her father. Alaric looked at it without taking it, which was a technique, making someone hold the thing they've brought while he assessed it at his own pace. She held it steady. Her arm did not waver. He took it. He read it. The room was completely silent. Through the windows, the Las Vegas morning was going full now, the last of the dawn color burning off, the city settling into its daytime performance. Somewhere in the building, a phone was ringing, distantly in a different apartment. Alaric looked up from the document. He looked at Daniel. Daniel's performed grief had gone very quiet. 18 months, Alaric said. Not a question, a measurement. The voice of a man placing the weight of a thing on a scale he had been running his whole life. "Uncle, how much?" "It wasn't, I didn't sell operational infrastructure, I only—" "How much did you give them?" The room pressure changed. Both of the men near the far wall had straightened slightly. Cade, behind Mara, had shifted his weight. Nico had not moved at all. Daniel's composure cracked down the center. Not dramatically, not the way composure cracks in movies, all at once. It cracked the way real things crack. In a small, specific place first, a tightening around the eyes, a slight opening of the mouth that he closed again, a breath that came in wrong. They approached me, he said. They knew things about the family already. They said if I didn't cooperate, they would release information that would implicate me in your brother's death. The silence that followed had a different quality than the silence before it. Alaric set the folder down on the table beside him, with the careful precision of a man ensuring his hands remained visibly controlled. My brother's death, he said. I was there, Daniel said. His voice had dropped to almost nothing. 11 years ago. I was there and I made a decision that they found out. I don't know how, but they had documentation and they said, "You've been leaking this family's intelligence for 18 months, Alaric said, to protect yourself from the consequences of something that happened 11 years ago. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice. Alaric's voice did not rise. It went in the other direction, quieter, which was the version of Alaric Voss that Mara had feared her entire life more than any other. You had a choice, and you made it again every month for a year and a half, and you sat in my meetings, and you ate at my table, and you let me trust you. He turned away from Daniel, the deliberate movement of a man closing a door. Get him out of my sight. The two men near the wall moved. Daniel said, Alaric. And then one of the men had his arm and the other had his other arm, and Daniel Voss, who had spent 18 months running a play he thought was clever enough to survive, was walked out of the apartment and into the service corridor, and the door closed behind them, and the room reconfigured itself around his absence. Alaric stood with his back to the window. He looked at Nico Valenti for the first time since Nico had entered the room. Nico looked back. Mara stood between them, not literally, but in every way that mattered, and felt the weight of both of them pressing from opposite directions and held herself in the center of it. Mr. Voss, Nico said. His voice was level, not deferential. Nico Valenti was constitutionally incapable of deference, but without aggression. The voice of a man who has decided on honesty as a strategy because every other strategy has already failed him this week. I moved into the Eastern Corridor without understanding whose interests I was crossing. That was my failure. I didn't do the full intelligence work before I moved, and I should have. Pan dianchasas isats. He paused. I also didn't do the full intelligence work on my own marriage. Both failures. Both mine. Alaric said nothing. I'm not here to negotiate, Nico said. I understand I'm not in a position to negotiate. I'm here because your daughter asked me to come, and because whatever I've done wrong, she hasn't done anything wrong. And she has been trying for 3 years to build something without hiding behind either of our names, which is more integrity than either of us has shown her. He stopped. That's all I have. The silence stretched. Alaric looked at Mara. The meeting at 10 tomorrow, she said. Someone from the consortium is going to be in the room. It's designed to go wrong. We have to cancel it, and we have to do it tonight, before whoever it is positions themselves. Who is it? Alaric said. I don't have the name yet. I have a structure, Luxembourg Holding Group, multiple shell layers. Daniel's financials might give us a thread if we pull the right. I'll pull it, Alaric said. He moved to his desk, picked up his own phone. This changes the timeline. He looked at Cade, the first time he had acknowledged Cade's presence. You work for Valenti. Yes, Cade said. Do you have access to his communication logs from the last 30 days? Anything relating to Eastern Corridor contacts? I can have it in an hour. You have 40 minutes. Alaric looked at Mara. Cancel the meeting through my people. Use my direct authorization. Then I want you and Valenti in separate rooms while I make some calls. Father, separate rooms, Mara. This is still a negotiation. I am still your father, and he still moved into my territory without permission, and we do not fast forward to the part where I have forgiven all of that, because the night was dramatic. He picked up his phone. Then, almost as an afterthought, with his back already turning, and eat something, both of you. You look like you've been through a fire. He walked to the other room, the door closed. Mara stood in the center of the apartment with Nico and Cade and the folder and the remains of a night that had stripped every comfortable fiction out of the room and left only the raw structure of the situation, visible and unglamorous and workable. Nico exhaled. It was the first time she had seen him exhale since they walked in. "Your father," he said. "I know. I know." He looked at her. Something moved across his face. Not the performed concern she had seen him use 1,000 times. Not the calculation, but something more exposed than either of those things. Something she had stopped expecting to see and wasn't entirely sure what to do with now that it was there. "The baby," he said. She looked at him. "Are you—" He stopped, started again. "How are you?" "I'm functional." "That's not what I asked. It's what I have right now." She picked up the folder from where Alaric had set it, straightened it. "When this is over, we'll have the other conversation. We'll have all the conversations. But right now I need you to sit in whatever room your father-in-law puts you in and not make any moves without checking with me first." She looked up. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "No impulse calls, no—" "Nico, if your phone rings and it's anyone connected to the Eastern operation, you let it go to voicemail." "Yes." "I mean it." "Mara." He held her eyes, and his voice was very quiet and very direct. "I hear you. I will do what you ask. I understand that I have not earned the right to lead anything in this room today." She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she nodded. Kate said, "I'll start pulling the communication logs." He moved toward the door. Mara sat down at the table, opened her laptop, began drafting the cancellation authorization for the 10 a.m. meeting in the language her father's people would recognize. The formal phrasing, the correct reference codes, the tone that said this comes from the top and is not a discussion. The apartment hummed around her. Through the wall she could hear Alaric's voice, not the words, just the low, measured cadence of a man making calls that would move significant things. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different from Celine's number. Different from any number she had seen tonight. She looked at it, answered it. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of a dropped call. The silence of someone present and choosing not to speak first. "Who is this?" she said. A voice came back. Male. Accented in a way she couldn't immediately place, European, possibly, with something under it that had been trained out of the original. Calm in the particular way of someone who operates at altitude and has never found any individual situation especially alarming. "Ms. Voss," the voice said. "Or do you prefer Valenti? I understand the situation has become somewhat ambiguous." She sat very still. "We haven't been introduced," the voice said. "But I believe you've been looking for me, Luxembourg Holding Group. Multiple shell layers, 18 months of infrastructure, of which Daniel Voss was only the most visible thread." Yes. A pause. "I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because you've impressed me, and I find it more productive to speak directly to impressive people than to continue routing around them." Another pause. "There is a version of tomorrow morning that doesn't end in conflict. I'd like to discuss it. Mara looked across the room. Nico was watching her. She held up one hand. "Wait," and turned slightly away and said into the phone, "Then discuss it." "Not over the phone," the voice said. "In person. Tonight. There is a location I'll send to this number in 5 minutes. Come alone or don't come. I'll know either way. And if I don't come, then tomorrow at 10 o'clock, the person I have positioned in that room will do what they were positioned to do. And both your father's organization and your husband's will spend the next 12 months destroying each other, and I will walk into the corridor that creates and build the thing I have been building for 4 years, and everyone in that meeting will have served their purpose." The voice was not cruel. It was simply factual, the way physics is factual. "But I think you'll come, Ms. Voss, because you are the only person in this situation who understands the full board. And people who understand the full board don't sit out the final move." The call ended. Mara lowered the phone. Her pulse was very loud in her own ears. She turned around. Nico was still watching her. He had read something in her face because he was, whatever else he was, a man who had spent his whole life reading rooms, and her face right now was a room with a lot happening in it. "What is it?" he said. She looked at him, then at the closed door behind which her father was making calls, then at Cade, who had stopped moving. The person behind the consortium just called me, she said. The air in the room changed. They want a meeting, she said. Tonight, alone. Nico came off the wall he had been leaning against. Absolutely not. They have someone positioned at tomorrow's meeting who will start a war if I don't go. Then we find out who it is and pull them out before... We have 9 hours, she said. We don't have the name. We don't have the location. We don't have the documentation trail yet. Cade needs time to pull the logs. Alaric needs time to work the financial thread. And none of that is certain. She looked at Nico steadily. This is certain. He called me because I got close enough to make him move. That's leverage. If you go alone to a meeting with the man who has been running a play to start a war, Mara, I know. You're pregnant. I know that too. Then you understand why I'm telling you that you are not walking into a room alone with... I understand why you're saying it. She held his eyes and did not give ground. And I need you to understand something back. This is not your call. This has not been your call since last night when you chose not to listen to me, and it is not your call now. I am Alaric Voss's daughter. I have been navigating rooms with dangerous men in them since before I knew that was what I was doing. And if there is a chance, one chance, to get a name and a location and stop tomorrow from happening, I am not going to sit in a safe room while it passes. Nico stood 6 feet away from her and breathed. She could see him fighting it, the instinct, the ego, the 15 years of being the one who walked into rooms so that no one else had to. She could see him fighting it, and she could see the moment he stopped fighting it, not because he agreed, but because he understood that she was right, and that understanding it was the only thing he had left to offer her. Then I'm outside the building, he said. Cade's inside. We have eyes on every exit. The moment anything changes, I walk out, she said. I'm not a martyr. I'm a strategist. His jaw worked. There's a difference? Tonight there is. Her phone buzzed. An address, east side of the city, a building she didn't recognize. She looked at the time. She had 4 hours until the meeting. She stood up, smoothed her coat, picked up the folder, and walked to her father's door. She knocked twice. The knock they had used since she was 12, the one that meant, I need to speak to you, and it's not a request, and pushed it open. Alaric looked up from his desk. Change of plan, she said. I need everything you have on the Luxembourg Consortium in the next 2 hours, and I need you to trust me with something I cannot fully explain yet. Alaric set his phone down. He looked at her with those flat gray eyes that she had spent her whole life trying to escape inheriting, and for the first time she could remember, she looked back at them without flinching and recognized them as her own. That was all she had time to understand before the night swallowed everything else. The building on the east side had no sign. It was 4 stories of poured concrete set back from the street behind a chain-link perimeter that looked abandoned but wasn't. Mara clocked the cameras before the cab had fully stopped, small and well-mounted, covering every angle of the approach. Someone had put real money into looking like they hadn't put money into anything. The neighborhood was light industrial, the kind of block that existed in every American city in the gap between what used to be there and what hadn't been built yet. Empty lots, a closed auto body shop, a warehouse with its loading doors painted shut. She paid the driver and got out. She stood on the sidewalk for 3 seconds and did not look at the dark sedan parked half a block east where Nico and Cade were sitting, because looking at it would tell the cameras where to look. Then she walked to the door. It opened before she reached it. The man inside was not the voice from the phone. He was hired geometry, large, quiet, positioned to communicate that the person who employed him had resources and used them without drama. He gestured for her coat. She shook her head. He didn't push. He led her through a ground floor that was empty and clean in the way of a space that has been recently cleared for a specific purpose, up a staircase to the 2nd floor, down a corridor with temporary lighting installed in the ceiling, the kind that runs on a standalone system, no building grid, and through a door at the end. The room had a table, 2 chairs, a second door on the far wall that she noted immediately and filed. One man was sitting at the table. He was older than she had expected from the voice, mid-60s maybe, with Northern European coloring and a face that had the particular weathering of someone who had spent decades in rooms like this one. Not a physical man, not the kind of man who had ever needed to be, He was wearing a gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he had his hands folded on the table in front of him, and he watched her enter the room with the relaxed attention of someone attending a presentation he had paid for. "Ms. Voss," he said, "you came alone." "I came as requested," she said. She sat down across from him. She did not put the folder on the table. She kept it on her lap, one hand flat on top of it. She did not take off her coat. She let him read both of those choices and watched him do it. "My name is Peter Vael," he said. "I won't pretend that's the only name I use, but it's the one that's real." "Peter Vael," she said, "Belgian registration. 3 holding structures between you and the Luxembourg entity. Investment in Eastern Corridor property development going back 11 years. Something moved in his expression. Appreciation, maybe. The specific appreciation of someone who has prepared for a negotiation and arrived to find the other party has also prepared. "You've been busy," he said. "My father has been busy. I've been reading." 2 hours of Alaric's files spread across the table in the 47th floor apartment, while Nico sat in the adjacent room and Cade worked the communication logs, and Alaric made calls in the language of a man dismantling something with great precision. 2 hours in which the shape of Peter Vile's operation had come clear. Not completely, never completely with a structure this layered, but enough. Enough to know that he was not a criminal, not exactly. He was an accumulator. He found corridors where 2 existing powers were in tension, and he waited for the tension to become conflict, and then he walked into the vacuum. He had done it in 3 other cities. Las Vegas was the 4th. "You want the Eastern Corridor," she said. "Not all of it. The development rights along the port infrastructure, Newark, Baltimore, the secondary terminals. My father's family has held the operational relationships there for 30 years. You can't buy them. You can't outcompete them, so you needed them gone." Vale was quiet. "Daniel Voss gave you the intelligence," she said. "Celine Cruz fractured the Valenti-Voss proximity before an alliance could form. The meeting tomorrow was designed to spark a conflict that would tie both organizations up in war while you moved on the port relationships." She held his eyes. 11 years of planning, 4 cities. You're very patient." "Patience is underrated," Vale said. "So is loyalty." She set the folder on the table. "You underestimated what Alaric Voss built because you were looking at the structure and not the people inside it. You found the weak point, Daniel, and you used it, but you didn't account for what the family looked like when it didn't have a weak point." Vale looked at the folder, did not reach for it. "What is it you want, Ms. Voss?" he said. "You didn't come here to explain my own operation to me." "No," she said. "I came here to offer you a way out of it." He waited. "Cancel your asset at tomorrow's meeting," she said. "Give me the name and I'll have them removed before 10. In exchange, I will personally ensure that the Voss family does not pursue criminal referrals on the Daniel Voss intelligence operation. You walked a very careful line for 18 months. You probably feel confident about your legal exposure. I want you to feel less confident about it. And if I decline, then my father spends whatever it costs to put your name in the hands of every port authority relationship on the eastern seaboard, and you spend the next 5 years watching the corridor close in front of you one terminal at a time." She kept her voice level. "The development rights you've been positioning for will still exist, but every door that currently opens will stop opening. And in that business, Peter, the doors are the business." He looked at her for a long time. The temporary lighting hummed overhead. "You're asking me to walk away from 11 years, he said. "I'm asking you to walk away from the part that was always going to fail," she said. "You cannot manufacture a war between Voss and Valenti anymore. The variable you didn't account for is sitting across from you." He unfolded his hands. He reached inside his jacket. She did not move, did not flinch, did not let her eyes go to the second door or to the guard position she had calculated near the entrance. She held his eyes and held the still place inside her chest that she had found sometime around 3 in the morning and had not let go of since. He put a phone on the table. He typed something on it. He turned it to face her. A text thread. A name and a short message. "Stand down. Meeting is off." He looked at her, waiting. She looked at the phone, then at him. "Send it," she said. He pressed send. She watched the delivery confirmation appear. She picked up the folder and stood. "The Voss family will be in touch through formal channels," she said. Whatever comes next between us will be done at a table with lawyers and documentation and without any more manufactured variables. She buttoned the top button of her coat. And Peter, Daniel Voss is a separate matter. Whatever he told you about your leverage over him, the information about his father's death, I want you to know that my father already has it. He's had it for years. The leverage you thought you had was never real. Dot boss setgiste. Something went out in Vale's face, not all at once. Gradually, like a building losing power floor by floor. She turned and walked to the door. She walked down the corridor and down the staircase and through the empty ground floor and out into the night air, and she kept walking, past the chain-link perimeter and down the block and around the corner until she was out of the camera line, and then she stopped and pressed her back against the wall of the closed auto body shop and breathed. Just breathed. In and out. The air tasted like rain residue and exhaust, and the particular mineral smell of the desert city at night, and she stood in it and felt her legs shake for exactly 10 seconds, and then she straightened up and pushed off the wall. The dark sedan pulled up. The door opened. She got in. Nico was in the back seat. He looked at her face and did not ask if she was all right, which was the right call, which was the first time she could remember him making the right call without being told what it was. "It's done," she said. Cade said from the front, "The meeting?" "Cancelled." Asset stood down. She leaned her head back against the seat. The city moved past the windows. "Take me to the Meridian. I need to tell my father." Nobody said anything else. The sedan moved through the Las Vegas night, and Mara sat in it with her eyes open and the folder on her lap, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has spent 12 hours burning at a frequency she cannot sustain for much longer. And she felt the baby as a weight in her body that was also somehow an anchor, something that pulled her toward the ground in a way that kept her from floating away into the abstraction of what the night had cost. She was still there. She was still herself. That was enough for now. Alaric Voss listened to her account of the meeting without interrupting. He stood at his window, always the window, with his hands behind his back and his face turned slightly away from her, which was the posture she recognized as his listening posture. The one that meant he was taking in every word and running it against every other piece of information he had, and she would not know his conclusions until he chose to share them. When she finished, he was quiet for 30 seconds. "Vael," he said. "Yes. I've heard the name, never connected to this." He turned. "You got the stand-down message." I watched him send it. He looked at her, then past her to where Nico was standing near the entrance. Not in the room precisely, but not outside it either. The threshold. Appropriate. "The Eastern Corridor operation," Alaric said. He was speaking to Mara, but his eyes moved to Nico. "It pulls back from the Newark and Baltimore adjacencies. That's non-negotiable." "I understand," Nico said. "I'm not asking if you understand. I'm telling you the condition. And I'm accepting it." Alaric looked at him for 3 full seconds. The kind of look that is not hostile and is not warm and is doing something more precise than either. Measuring, calibrating, running the man in front of him against the category of men he had spent his life dealing with. "You cost me an asset," Alaric said. "Daniel was already gone," Nico said. "He made that choice before I showed up. The encroachment on my territory accelerated the conditions that made him useful to Vael." "Yes." Nico held the eye contact. "That's true." Alaric looked at Mara. She looked back at him. Something passed between them that had no language. Only the specific weight of a father and daughter who have arrived, by different and difficult routes, at the same room, on the same side for the first time. He looked back at Nico. "The child," he said. "Yes," Nico said. "That child carries this family's name." "I know. Do you understand what that means? Not abstractly, specifically." Alaric moved away from the window, crossed toward Nico with the slow precision of a man who has chosen to close a distance and wants the closing to be legible. "It means that everything I have built, everything that child will inherit, is only as strong as the integrity of the people around her. I have spent 60 years removing people who did not have the integrity the structure required." He stopped 3 feet from Nico. "I am not a forgiving man." "But, mate." "Momon." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Nico said. "I'm asking for the chance to be useful." Alaric studied him. "Go home," he said finally. Not warmly, but not as a dismissal either, as an instruction. The kind you give someone who is going to be needed tomorrow. Both of you. Whatever conversations you need to have them somewhere that isn't my living room. He turned back to the window. I'll have formal terms drawn up by morning. Cade Rourke can act as point of contact on the Valenti side. Mara said, Father? He turned. She crossed the room. She stood in front of him and looked at him. The gray eyes, the careful face, the 63 years of decisions that had brought them both to this night. And she said, the leverage Vial had on Daniel, about his father's death. Was it real? Alaric held her eyes. Yes, he said. Did you know? A pause. Yes, he said. She breathed. Then you let Daniel carry it for 11 years. I was waiting to see what he would do with it. You were testing him. I test everyone. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that he looked for just a moment like something had shifted in the careful architecture of his face. Not guilt. Alaric Voss did not produce guilt in recognizable quantities, but something adjacent. Something that knew it was being seen accurately. You can't do that with her, Mara said. Her voice was quiet and absolutely final. Not with my daughter. Whatever you do with the people in your organization, you do not do that with her. You don't use her as a variable. You don't let her carry things to see what she does with them. You don't build tests into her life while she's trying to live it. She held his gaze. She is not an asset. She is not a successor. She is a child. And I am going to raise her with that understanding, even if everything around her says otherwise. Alaric said nothing. Do you hear me? She said. I hear you, he said. She held his eyes for one more second. Then she turned and walked to where Nico was waiting at the threshold, and they went to the elevator together and went down. They sat in the parking structure for a while before asking Marco to drive. Not talking, just sitting. The sedan idled quietly, and the concrete structure around them was gray and low-lit and humming with some mechanical function of the building above. And the city was somewhere outside, and everything that had happened in the last 18 hours was somewhere inside both of them, taking up all available space. Nico said, You didn't have to include me tonight. No, she agreed. You had everything you needed to walk into that building alone and finish it alone. Yes. Why did you bring me? She looked at the concrete wall in front of the car. Somebody had written something on it years ago in marker, and then someone else had tried to paint over it, and the paint had faded and the writing was coming back through, the way things did. Because the child needs to know her father tried, she said. Not that he succeeded, not that he was perfect, that he tried, when the moment was real and the stakes were real, and he showed up. She turned to look at him. I couldn't give her that story if you weren't in the building. His jaw worked. He looked at his hands. I didn't know who you were, he said. For 3 years. I told myself the story I wanted, that I had found you, that I had given you something. It made me the one who had power in the room. He stopped. I think I knew something was off. I think I could feel there was more to you than what you were giving me, and instead of being curious about it, I was threatened by it, and I looked for someone who would let me be the biggest thing in the room. He exhaled slowly. Celine let me be that. I know. I'm not explaining it to excuse it. I know that too. He looked at her. Are we? He stopped. Started differently. What do we do now? She thought about it, not the way she had been thinking all night, not the strategic version, not the board with all its pieces, just the actual question. What do we do now? 2 people in the back of a car at 4 a.m. after a night that had burned everything flammable between them and left only the structural elements, the child, the history, the particular knowledge that comes from having been genuinely known by someone, even imperfectly, even incompletely. We go somewhere and sleep, she said. And tomorrow we talk like adults about what the truth of this is, not the version that's easy for either of us, the actual truth. She held his eyes. And you listen, not to manage what I'm saying, not to calculate the response. You listen because it's the first thing you've owed me for 3 years. He nodded. And then, she said, we'll know. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't the beginning of forgiveness. It was something more honest than that. The acknowledgement that two people who had been something real to each other had not yet finished the work of understanding what that something was, and would not know until the work was done. He said, "Okay." Marco drove them back toward the Strip. Mara watched Las Vegas go past the windows one more time. The neon, the glass, the architecture of design desire. The city that had no memory and no mercy and no interest in any individual story, and she let it go past without needing it to mean anything. Daniel Voss was handled quietly. Alaric did not go to the law. That was not how Alaric Voss resolved internal matters. Daniel was removed from the board. The secondary investigation into his father's death, which Alaric had apparently been holding like a card for 11 years, was opened formally and internally, and its findings were shared with the appropriate remaining family members. Daniel cooperated, which suggested the weight of the secret had been its own kind of prison, and that some part of him was relieved to put it down, even at this cost. He left Las Vegas 3 weeks later. He did not come back. Peter Vale retreated to his structures. The Eastern Corridor development play did not die entirely. Men like Vale did not abandon 11-year investments entirely, but it changed shape. He found a different approach, through different channels, without the manufactured conflict as its engine. Mara monitored it from a distance through the first year, and then, when the intelligence confirmed he had genuinely redirected, she stopped monitoring it. There were better things to pay attention to. Butsy. Celine Cruz left Las Vegas in the same week Daniel did. She did not contact Mara again. Mara did not look for her. What Celine had done was what Celine had done. The betrayal, and then the correction, the damage, and then the information that partially undid the damage. People were rarely entirely one thing. Mara had learned that early, and her life had repeatedly confirmed it. She filed Celine Cruz in the category of complicated debts, not owed, not forgiven, simply acknowledged and set aside. Nico pulled the Eastern Corridor operation back to its pre-expansion footprint. He did it without being asked a second time, which was the only thing Alaric Voss subsequently said about it. Not that it was adequate, not that he was impressed, just he did it without being asked a second time. Which, from Alaric, was the equivalent of an extended standing ovation. The formal agreement between the two organizations was signed 6 weeks after the night of the storm. It was not an alliance in the way Mara had once imagined, not the sweeping unified structure that could have been built if things had gone differently in the beginning. It was more precise than that. Specific corridors, specific non-compete arrangements, specific protocols for communication when their territories came close to touching. It was enough. Enough meant more than she had expected it to. The conversations she had promised Nico were harder than either of them made them look. There were 3 of them, spread over 2 weeks, in a neutral apartment she rented for exactly that purpose. Not the penthouse, not anywhere that belonged to either of their histories. A clean room with natural light and bad coffee, and no furniture that carried the weight of any previous version of them. She told him everything. The full account, her mother, Philadelphia, the day Alaric arrived at the door, the years of navigation between a hidden identity and a life that felt genuinely her own, the choice she had made to keep the Voss name out of their marriage until she was sure the marriage was real. He listened. He asked questions that were the right questions. Not challenges, not defenses, just the questions of someone trying to understand the actual geography of someone else's experience. She asked him questions too. Some of them he answered easily. Some of them took him a long time. One of them he couldn't answer at all, which she respected more than if he had manufactured an answer. At the end of the 3rd conversation, she said, "I don't know if this becomes something again. I want you to understand that. I'm not working toward a conclusion. I'm working toward knowing what's actually true." He said, "I know. You can't rush it. I know that too. And if what's actually true turns out to be that we're better parents than we are partners, then that's what it is," he said, "and I'll live with it." She looked at him across the bad coffee and the clean room. "You've changed," she said. "People do," he said, "when the thing they've been avoiding catches up with them." "Not always." "No," he said. "Not always." Her daughter was born on a Tuesday in March, in a hospital in New York City where Mara had moved 4 months before the birth, to separate the child's beginning from the city where everything had nearly ended. She had dark hair from the moment she arrived. Dark hair and a focused, serious expression that the nurses said was just the look of newborns, but that Mara recognized with a feeling that was equal parts warmth and terror as something inherited, something she had spent 30 years looking at in mirrors and in her father's face. Nico was there. He was in the room, which had been a decision they had made together and had not required as much negotiation as she had anticipated, which was itself a data point. He stood back when she needed him to, and came forward when she needed him to, and when the baby was placed in his arms for the first time, he looked down at her with an expression that Mara did not have the right word for. Not joy exactly, though there was that in it. Something larger than joy. Something that looked like a man understanding, for the first time, the actual scale of what he had almost walked away from. He held her for a long time. When he passed her back, his hands were shaking. Not the way they shake from fear. The other way. They named her Elena. Not after anyone. Just a name that was only hers, with no history attached to it, no dynasty and no debt, and no one else's story built into it. Just a name that meant she had started from herself. Alaric came to New York 3 weeks after the birth. He stood in the doorway of Mara's apartment and looked at the baby in the way men like Alaric look at things they have not calculated for, with something that was slightly too large for the face it was trying to cross. He reached out one hand and let Elena's fingers close around his index finger with the automatic grip that newborns have, the grip that understands only the basic terms of the world. Something is here. Hold it. He stood like that for a while. She has your eyes, he said. I know, Mara said. Your mother's mouth. She looked at him. He had not mentioned her mother in years. The mention sat between them like something delicate being placed on a surface that might not hold it. You should tell me about her, Mara said. Properly. Not the version you've managed, the actual version. Alaric looked at the baby. Yes, he said. Soon. Soon, he agreed. He stayed for 2 hours. He drank the coffee she made without commenting on its quality, which was generosity from Alaric. He sat in the chair by the window and held Elena twice more when she was awake and watchful, and doing the thing newborns do, where they look at everything with an intensity that makes you feel examined. When he left, he paused in the doorway. He turned back. He said, You did well. In that room with Vielle. She looked at him. You did better than I would have, he said. At your age. He left. She stood in the quiet apartment with her daughter in her arms and the sound of New York outside the windows. The city's permanent indifferent roar, so different from Las Vegas, no neon in it, just density and motion and 8 million individual stories happening simultaneously in all directions. And she felt the weight of the baby, the specific warm animal weight of a person who was entirely new to the world and was trusting the people holding her to know what to do with it. She did not know everything. She was clear-eyed enough to know that. She did not know what she and Nico would become over the next year, the next decade. She did not know whether the agreement between the organizations would hold at every point of pressure. She did not know what Elena would make of the world she had been born into, or what she would need in order to survive it well. But she knew the war had not happened. She knew the room in Las Vegas where she had counted to 11 while her marriage ended had not been the end of anything, only a pressure point. A place where the hidden structure of everything had been forced to the surface. She knew that she had walked into a room alone with a dangerous man and walked back out with what she needed and had not needed to be rescued. She knew that she had stood in front of her father and said the things she had needed to say to him her entire life, and the world had not collapsed. She stood at the window with Elena in her arms and the city going about its enormous ordinary business below. And she thought about a woman standing at a different window 18 months ago, counting to 11, holding a secret that could end wars, waiting for a man who wasn't listening. That woman had survived, more than survived. She had walked through the storm that was meant to drown her and come out the other side holding the thing she had been protecting all along. Not the name, not the dynasty, not the marriage or the alliance or the empire. Just this, just a child with dark hair and new eyes. Looking at everything, not afraid of any of it yet. Mara held her daughter and let the city roar past the glass and breathed the quiet in the room and thought, this is what you build when you stop hiding. Not safety, not certainty, just the true shape of your own life. Finally visible. Finally yours.